My name's Marcus, and I'm no expert comic book collector. With help from some not like-minded friends and you, our audience, I want to explore the amazing medium of comic books. This podcast is a reaction to all the common misconceptions I hear about comics as an art form. It's about how superheroes aren't the only type of stories you can find in comics. From true crime and memoir to historical fiction and sci-fi, comics have it all. This podcast is about educating people on what they can find out there and giving readers, new, old, or misinformed, something great to read. Listen up, nerds and future nerds. This is the VF Comics Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the VF Comics and Graphics Podcast. This week we are so excited because today is the first day of Will Eisner week. And so I wanted to start off with a quote. And that quote is from Will Eisner: "I want to point out to adults that there is a world of good material available to you now in comic form, in this medium, and learn to give it your support, because the more you support it, the better the material will be as it comes out." And I think that's a sentiment that we as a podcast have always tried to impress upon others. And it's that comics are and can be high quality despite their reputation. But before we get into that conversation, which is a whole thing in itself, let's go ahead and say hi. In case this is your first time, my name is Marcus.
Hey, I'm Megan.
Hello, my name is Tom.
Excellent. And Megan, if you listened last week, you'll notice that Megan didn't miss her cue this time, so that was really nice.
Oh, did you keep that in there?
I did. You should go listen to it. There's a good.
Unfortunate.
It got edited out, and then he went back and put it back.
You're
in.
kidding.
It got edited
Why?
out. I got edited out, and then I was like, "No, we need that," and so went and redid all of it just because.
Who edited it? I thought you were doing the editing.
No, my brother. He's doing the editing.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. And he was right to leave it out.
No, he was not. I was just like, oh, man,
you.
you forgot to do this. So me and Meg and Tom every week get together to talk about the comic book industry, books that we're reading, and everything in between. And like I said before, today marks the first day of Will Eisner week. You see, Will Eisner was not just a pioneer in the industry for what he wrote, but he was also an artist who fought for comics and sequential art to be recognized as a legitimate form of art and literacy. He's also considered the father of the graphic novel, with his book, A Contract with God and Other Tenement Stories, being considered one of the earliest, if not the first example of the format. If you've never read it before, it's an incredible read, but the title story, it's several short stories that all take place in a New York tenement, and he based it off of some of his own experiences, particularly the loss of his own daughter when she was still pretty young. Something I highly recommend anyone pick up if you want to see the power of this medium. Again, that title is A Contract with God and Other Tenement Stories. So here at VF Comics and Graphics, we're going to celebrate the beginning of Will Eisner Week, and especially as we get really close to finishing out our first year. We've been doing this for almost a full year, which is crazy. We are starting a book club, and you will find the links later today on our Facebook and Instagram and all of our social media sites for how to join the book club on Facebook. We're planning on reading just a variety of graphic novels in this club to help everyone expand their reach. So even if you think you might not be as interested in it, I highly encourage you to try out some of the books that we're going to read. Our first book is brought to you by Megan because we decided to pick books, take turns picking books based on whose birthday was next. And when we picked the first book, it was a week before Megan's birthday.
Heyo.
Yeah. And so Megan has chosen Embroideries by Marjane Satrapi. Did I say that last name correctly?
Satrapi,
Yes. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So this is Megan. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that book? I love you're like
put me on the spot,
you're like
dude.
wait what?
It is a book. It's oh god, dang it. No.
No, you're fine.
I don't have anything pulled up about it, and it's been a while since I read it.
No, I've got it up here just in case. Okay. I couldn't remember because I just thought, since you had brought it to me, shut up, Meg. So Embroideries, in case you have never heard of the author, is actually from the same author who wrote the best-selling book Persepolis. If you have heard of that, then you probably know what kind of quality to expect from this book. So just to kind of talk about it, I'm going to read from Goodreads its kind of synopsis of the title. So from best-selling author of Persepolis comes this gloriously entertaining and enlightening look into the sex lives of Iranian women. Already, I have no background on anything that's happening. Embroideries gathers together Marjane's tough-talking grandmother, stoic mother, glamorous and eccentric aunt, and their friends and neighbors for an afternoon of tea drinking and talking. Naturally, the subject turns to love, sex, and the vagaries of men. As the afternoon progresses, these vibrant women share their secrets, their regrets, and their often outrageous stories about, among other things, how to fake one's virginity, how to escape an arranged marriage, how to enjoy the miracles of plastic surgery, and how to delight in being a mistress. By turns revealing and hilarious, these are stories about the lengths to which some women will go to find a man, keep a man, or most important, keep up appearances. Full of surprises, this introduction to the private lives of some fascinating women whose life stories and lovers will strike us as at once deeply familiar and profoundly different from our own, is sure to bring smiles and of recognition to the faces of women everywhere, and to teach us all a thing or two. And I like that it ends that way because becoming informed and learning something is a very important part of reading. And I have no background on anything in that synopsis.
Yeah.
So this could be a really interesting and eye-opening read. So that's what we're going to be doing this first month. And the way that it's going to work is we're going to primarily be talking and discussing it and bringing up points on the Facebook group. And then at the end of the month, when we are ready to release our next pick, we're going to spend a whole episode breaking down the book, talking about the author and the history of the book. So look forward to that. And if you haven't joined, again, the link will be in the description of the episode below, so you can join us for this amazing book club that we're starting. And Tom is going to get to pick the next one because I believe we're going to get to announce it around your birthday, Tom.
Yeah.
What? When is your birthday?
It's April 3rd.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
We were 2 days away from being able to talk about how Tom's birth was a joke. But dang.
Oh, dang. So
clutched
close.
it. I had to dodge it,
So that is our big announcement for Will Eisner week. Moving on to a couple pieces of news that I did want to talk about with you guys real quick. One I found really interesting for myself, and the other I know that if you're a fan of WandaVision, you're going to want to stick around for. But the first thing is, if you keep up with comics, particularly superhero comics, you may be aware of the name George Perez. He is one of the most influential modern writers in modern comics. In fact, in the 80s, he is responsible for reshaping the Teen Titans, Wonder Woman. He wrote Crisis on Infinite Earths, which was one of the first mega event books. I think maybe the first event book ever written for a huge crossover at one of these comic book companies. He brought a lot of maturity to DC storytelling, and he brought a lot of great ideas to Marvel as well. In fact, some of his content that he made what influenced the Infinity War and Endgame films from Avengers and Marvel. The reason I'm bringing up his history of as a writer is that he has announced that he was diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer, and that he would no longer be addressing it based on how severe that it's gotten, and he's been given 6 months to a year to live.
Oh my God.
He retired from some of these health issues back in 2019, and I really wanted to bring this up because he is an important writer in comics. If you are looking for high quality superhero writing, wouldn't something that you wouldn't expect, especially if you have a low opinion of superhero genre in general. His work is what you want to go look for. I'm a big fan of his New Teen Titans run from the 80s because he took these very silly characters. In fact, Robin is still wearing his boy shorts whenever he first started writing this Teen Titans. And so they all have these classic kind of corny golden age looks, but they are dealing with the fallouts of violence and demons and people getting killed and people who are being abused. He helped introduce the world, I believe, to Cyborg and Raven, who are two very popular Teen Titans characters. And he's written so much that you can easily find his work reprinted at any comic book or bookshop. I guarantee you, if you go, in fact, at the library Meg and I work at, his Wonder Woman stuff was reprinted just this last year. So we have several volumes of the library of his work on Wonder Woman on our new shelf. So a lot of his stuff is being reprinted, and you can find a lot of his stuff on the DC Universe Infinite app, Marvel Unlimited, or even Comixology. So again, his name is George Perez. I encourage anyone who hasn't read some of his work to really go find something from him. The next bit of news that I thought was really interesting for you guys is, I know that, Tom, you were a big fan, especially of WandaVision, and
Yes.
particularly of the character Agatha Harkness. Yeah.
Yes.
So Agatha Harkness is a character who made her first live action appearance in WandaVision, but her history is actually first showing up in more of a science fiction themed comic. She first showed up in Fantastic Four to help take care of, I believe, Franklin Richards, the fantastic Sue Storm, and Mr. Fantastic. Oh, why can't I think of his name right now? I'm a bad comic book reader. But their son, Franklin. And it became really clear really quickly that a regular group of foes of the Fantastic Four were called the Frightful Four because comics. And, you could walk around with that. And she was able to easily defeat them. And you don't really, from what I can tell, find out why or what she had done. So she was but you find there are some background hints that of her witchcraft abilities. And it was really, really cool because, again, they introduced this magical character in a very science type book.
Yeah.
Well,
That's cool.
Agatha Harkness, the first appearance of her was in Fantastic Four 94, and it went up for auction recently. It's already sold, but I wanted to share with you guys something in case you ever want to collect things about characters you love. So usually when these books go up for sale that are high graded, I mean, what kind of prices do you guys feel like you normally see for these kinds of books?
I feel like usually in the thousands, like if I base it off of like, I play Magic the Gathering and collect some Magic the Gathering stuff, and it's always like valuable cards from that, like the most valuable I think I've seen is like tens to 20,000 range,
Oof.
and then low end high value I think is always around 800 to 1,000, when you're looking at like when you start getting into the top tier.
Mhm.
So that would be my basis for starting, and I know though that some of these books have sold for millions of dollars.
Oh
and it
yeah, the
gets,
original Detective
you know
Comics
that's like
Superman.
a,
That's
yeah, you know what I mean. So I don't know, like it's hard to jump in, if I'm guessing like Fantastic Four, I mean,
Fantastic Four, and the first appearance of a character who was kind of minor, has shown up in plenty of comics, but last year the character got a huge boost from the WandaVision
Mhm.
Yeah.
show, and that can
Yeah.
affect the collector's market.
So what did the book sell for?
So right now I've got a couple of the values for different grades, and an 8.0 is considered very fine, VF, if you've ever heard that term before. And
No, I haven't.
a copy of this book
Never.
is valued at $48 as an
What?
8.0. And
$48?
a 9.0 is valued at about just $90.
Wow.
What?
But isn't that the time to like get in on those collectibles like that? Is
Yes, if you're a fan of Agatha Harkness and you're wanting to collect, and
Dang.
they are going to come out with a show, House of Harkness, that is going to be a Disney Plus series
Oh.
because of the popularity of the character. If you're looking to either just support, like you're a big fan of the character or want to turn around something, I would suggest instead of getting into cryptocurrency and NFTs, to look at
don't do that.
One, don't do those.
I can't comment on crypto, but
Yeah,
NFTs
yeah.
are.
First of all, don't do it.
Yeah. This seems like it might potentially be a pretty good investment. But I think the thing you're going to run into with certain books like this, though, is that this is from, I believe, let me check real quick. I just lost what year. It was published in 1970. And you kind of get to a point where the further back you go, the fewer, like used to, there weren't multiple printings of books. So it just depends on if someone took enough care of these kind of books. So I think the other thing that might drive the price of this up is that I don't really know how many copies in good condition of this book even exist.
Mm-hmm.
So
But it's all about how much it's wanted, right?
it's all about how much and that's the thing is, like, there's so many things. We had a episode a while ago about the collector's market, and that it is just kind of a mess. And there's a lot of things, like even if something's really wanted, the number of printings there are,
Yeah.
and if what is wanted is significant story wise or significant later, because you can find copies of a lot of different books pretty cheap despite their rarity. I know individual issues of the Watchmen are actually pretty cheap still, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's been reprinted as a graphic novel so much that there's no real need to go find those original issues.
Mm-hmm.
That is a little surprising.
Yeah.
That a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that's cool, and I mean, especially because I've seen so many different printings of that graphic novel, and I've never seen an individual issue. I've never met someone that's owned one.
When the
Like
Watchmen,
where they've brought it out. You have individual issues.
so I don't,
Okay.
but I have seen Michael, who owned the comic book store, when the Watchmen film came out in 2006, he actually had all 12 issues, and they
That's awesome.
They went for about $12 to $15 a pop, and they were in pretty good condition too. And those were, like, I believe, many of them were first prints. Like, he was in business at the time, and so anything he saw that was important like that, he put aside to collect later.
So at that point, that's like about what, like triple in value, right? Because usually it's like $3 to $4.99.
Oh, and it was way cheaper than that, even in the early.
Oh
90s.
yeah, that's true.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's
I didn't
now.
either.
Yeah.
Whoops.
So,
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, so something to look into. And one on the episode where I talked about the collector's market, one thing I wanted to implore everyone to do is that, honestly, if you like something, go to collect it. But I'm a big on collect something because you care about it, not because you're hoping to get a turnaround. If you like the idea of Agatha and you've been looking for her in books and you really enjoy those books, I know I'm a fan of a really strange character that shows up randomly. DC Comics Frankenstein's Monster, I'm a big fan of. He had a series during the New 52, Frankenstein Agent of Shade, and he's shown up in other books since then, and he was a big part of the Seven Soldiers of Victory reboot by Grant Morrison. but he's not a super prominent character. But I'm collecting those books because I just really like him. That's cool to me. Like, I have a 6-issue series that did not sell well called Gotham City Monsters, just because Frankenstein is in it.
Yes.
And don't at me about Frankenstein's monster's name or any of that. All right.
Huh.
um, you know, if we're not gonna get in. I'm not gonna get into that. I'm just gonna get up on people. So that is really it for news. I just want to tell you guys about it, especially because Tom, again, I know that you were a big fan of that character and that actress and what they did, and you
Yeah,
can't wait
I'm
for
real
more.
excited.
Um,
That was such a great run.
yes,
I'm excited for the new Doctor Strange too, because we'll get more of Wanda. And Wanda, uh, I really like the magical characters. That's something from that all those films that has been my favorite, and I'm excited to see um, more of them.
yeah, they've done so good with those films. I cannot wait for Multiverse of Madness. It looks insane.
Yeah, I
It
really want to
does.
read that. What House of M? Right? Is that the big
I
storyline that a lot of that came from?
Oh, so no, House of M is
From
basically
from WandaVision, I mean, right? That like elements
um
of that, right?
oh I mean, so Wanda in House of M, I believe, if I'm remembering my X-Men stuff correctly, House of M is where reality changes and mutants are basically the ruling class of the world. Um, I would say that it's very similar in some ways to there was the Vision series from a few years ago, where the Vision has a family, and
Okay.
some other books like that. I'm gonna research that and find that out for you. For what's
Okay.
best, I would not. I would say no. House of M. It's very X-Men heavily
Okay.
involved, and that wouldn't. I don't think that would satiate your taste, based on you're a big
Okay.
fan of WandaVision.
Because I remember trying to go into a deep dive, and I found this one podcast, and that was like when they were. It was when we were about halfway through the series, and they were, theorizing. We can talk about slight spoilers for WandaVision at this point,
Yeah,
right?
it's over a year.
Probably, yeah.
Okay. And when they were kind of predicting what wound up being Agatha, as Mephisto was going to be that kind of antagonist character, and that book was brought up, and I remember being like, I just at the time was wanting to consume more for sure
Yeah,
of that, and so
there's plenty of good stuff for her to consume. I think sometimes the thing that hurts some of Marvel comics is that, and I'm going to talk about this later when we talk about what I've been reading lately. I've always had a hard time hopping into Marvel comics because they've never done like a cleanup of their continuity the way DC has. Granted,
yeah.
I'm not saying DC's better in that because they always get messy again really quickly. um, but Wanda and Pietro are very heavily involved in Avengers and then X-Men as well in those worlds, and it's really complicated. Um, like if I remember the most recent thing about their parentage, it's like Magneto was supposed to be their dad, but now they were, I believe, created by the High Evolutionary on, I believe, is it called Counter Earth, which is the Earth opposite the sun in our solar system. There's a lot going on
Wow. Okay,
there.
so they changed that because that's what I remember reading too. Is that Magneto was their father?
Yeah, no, so that's been updated and changed a little bit, and I think that was due to the Marvel movie situation where they didn't have the rights to the X-Men,
Oh,
and so
okay.
they wanted
Okay.
to fix that. Anyways, so if you're a big fan of Agatha Harkness, go look for that again. Fantastic Four number 94. But for the main thing I want to talk about this week is Will Eisner Week. And again, because it's the start today, March 1st is a start, and going till March 7th, which is next Monday, is Will Eisner Week. And not only are we celebrating online, where you can go to WillEisnerAwards.com, and I'll have a link to that here, or Will Eisner Awards, .com, and I'll have a link to that on our description, and find videos and lectures and things. But you can also find activities, posters about Will Eisner Week. And if you go to the Facebook page, which I will also link below, you're going to find just an endless variety of programs that libraries, museums, schools, bookstores are all doing to celebrate Will Eisner Week. I, for instance, again, work for a library, and so I'm going to be getting together with Randy Duncan. If you weren't listening back in December, Randy is a professor of comic studies here in Arkansas. He is very well known and very prominent for bringing up comic studies as a legitimate study in colleges. But I'm going to be moderating a guest talk by him, and he's going to be talking about some of Eisner's early work before he got into graphic novels about the Spirit. And the Spirit is a classic detective noir series that Will Eisner is very popular for. It is called Eisner Noir: The Mean-ish Streets of Central City. Um, so I'm really lucky that I'm going to get to moderate that. And by moderate, I'm going to introduce him and let him do his thing. I will also include the link to that discussion, which will be happening on March 7th at 6:30 p.m. Central.
So this is a virtual event, Marcus?
This will be a virtual event. So Randy's got a lot of stuff. If you're interested in this, or you want to know more about Will Eisner, or you want to ask somebody questions about comic studies, you can go to the event on Facebook through the link, and you can post questions there, because I will be spending the last 20 minutes asking Professor Duncan questions about any of the things related to Will Eisner and the Spirit and comics. So please feel free to post some questions there, and we will have a chat where you can ask questions live. So if you can't think of anything now and you join us, and while he's talking, you think of something, ask it during the presentation, and I will hopefully have time to get to that. I'm really, really excited about that. Randy is the nicest guy in the world and very giving of his time, and you can find a lot of discussions he's done about comic studies or Will Eisner. Last year, I hosted a panel with him that was just incredible, where he informed me about all kinds of comics that I just I wasn't aware of. In fact, that discussion is what inspired me to do this podcast.
Yeah, there were
Aw.
multiple. Who else was in that? It was
Um,
you and him.
I
And
had a local artist. Oh man, I feel so embarrassed right now off the top of my head. Gosh, he was the nicest guy in the world. I had,
I'm asking the hard questions
yeah,
here.
I had James, who
Yeah, James was. Yeah,
James was there.
Jess was on it too, right?
And
Was
Jess
she?
Carson, who I've had
Yep.
on before.
Mm-hmm.
Aw, good group of
She is
folks.
a writer for television and film, and is currently working on the Flash television show. We also had an episode with her last year in November. If you want to
Okay.
go back and find that, her name is Jess Carson. Awesome lady. Um, oh man, you know what? Oh, I had it.
It's
I
a long time
feel
ago. I mean,
this
this was
this
still
was a
like early pandemic, I think,
no, it was a
right?
year
Like
ago. No, it was a year ago. It was
it
just.
was only a year ago. Okay, because I remember like I don't know, man. Was it
Mm-hmm,
just a year?
mm-hmm.
Because I remember like Oliver watched you virtually because we hadn't really seen been able to like do a lot
Yeah,
yet, you know.
this was a year ago, and I remember because like this led to me starting the podcast.
Okay, wow.
Um,
Pandemic brain, I guess. Like
yeah.
it just
Oh, I
feels
feel
like
you.
it was so much longer. Yeah. That's so funny.
So instead of going through a whole spiel where someone has to listen to me talk about Will Eisner, who he is, what he's done, you'll be able to do that in my in my not my in Professor Duncan's talk on Eisner Noir. I actually instead wanted to ask you guys about something that I thought was a really important question to address, because it's something that Will Eisner fought for during his lifetime. He was always pushing for comics to be considered legitimate art, literacy, all that. But even today in 2022, despite, the Marvel Cinematic Universe and, how highly thought of and how popular superhero things are, comics still, and it's something I face as a children's librarian, are still not considered high art. In fact, they're considered still pretty disposable and low quality. So, what I want to ask you guys, and then I'll tell you what I think, is what do you think is holding comics back from being recognized as the great art form that it is?
Well, it's definitely gotten better, so that's good. I mean, I think we're heading in a positive direction with that. Um, I don't know. I think when I was a kid, I feel like I thought that comics were more like kind of they reminded me of like picture books, when I was a kid because I didn't know better and I was like, "Oh, this is something that's written for kids." Which first of all, terrible argument because picture books are the fucking best and
Yeah,
some of
they're
the
so
best art.
incredible.
And
Picture books
yes,
also.
they are one of my favorite things to read. Um because the art is just phenomenal. But I think part of it for me was that, and I feel bad even saying that, but I got older and I was like, oh no, this is really good quality stuff. I don't know, why I thought that adults couldn't read this. I mean, adults can also read picture books. Like my dog is whining. I'm sorry, I'm gonna stop
Oh, poor guy.
him. I'm
It's
sorry,
hard being
babe.
it's hard being a pupper.
It's hard being little. Hi, babe.
I maybe like a first wondering, and I'm not saying this is my opinion. This is me asking because I'm curious. Is what comic book to you has hit the heights that, let's say, some of like the great novels have hit? Because they're not in the same conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And what comic book would you put up in that category with a book like Ulysses or To the Lighthouse or something like that, that what is which comic is that?
That's hard because it is different because it's visual. Because one of the when I'm reading graphic novels or comics or sequential art, what is most important to me is normally the art. So that's a hard. I compare it more to like film. In some ways, I think more than books, which is weird. It's like the part of my brain that really likes like short films and like animated series is the part that's like, yes, graphic novels. Um,
What
so
then,
so
to
that's a
comparing it
hard.
to great films then, if you're not thinking of it even as literature, you're thinking of it like a visual medium, you know, because I mean, film is definitely considered
Yeah,
high art,
right, for
and
sure.
even in that conversation, comic book films they get shot at a little bit too. Look at
Yes.
Scorsese,
Yeah.
and his reaction to comic book films,
Well,
and
and I think that the way Scorsese approached it, and the way a lot of people approach it, is they treat comic book adaptation films as a genre end to end. And I think a lot of the times they run into the same thing a lot of us run into, in that I think some people aren't aware of some of the films that are comic adaptations. And often too they point to the lowest common denominator. Like they usually will point to the lower quality versions of these things. But to me that would be like pointing to 50 Shades of Grey as to books are low quality. Like there are absolutely very popular not good comics, just like there are popular not good books or movies. We have 5 or 6 Transformer films at this point. I say that as a fan of Transformers. Those movies suck ass. um,
but it's also okay to enjoy that stuff.
and that's the thing.
I
Agreed. And I'm
As
glad you
someone
stopped
that
me there.
I like when people elevate things, and you're going to talk about high art, whether it's literature, film, art itself. I like that, and I like when people try to rise up to that and create
Mm-hmm.
something at that tier and have conversations about it and educate someone about that. I think that's great, and I wish that would happen more so that people don't feel intimidated by it, because there are so many things to experience and learn in those conversations and consuming those things. But it's also great if like you want to escape and veg out on on media that is just like there for you to enjoy and have fun to, because there are some days where I know we've like life has kicked your ass and you want to just zone and laugh or experience like some other story that you don't have to break down and analyze. You can just enjoy it at its base level, and
For
the both
example,
it's not all or nothing.
yes,
It can all be there for you to
you
love and enjoy.
yes, and
You know.
and to your point, it's just that, like, there is upcoming, and I'm very excited for it, by Cullen Bunn, who is an incredible author.
Oh, I
He
love
is
him.
writing the Godzilla versus the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and to
Oh
me,
snap.
yes,
What?
and
Stop.
it's like this is, and there was I read a Tolkien quote a long time ago about escapism, and his opinion of it was that, like, you know it's our duty, it's our duty to escape sometimes in order to mentally survive. And so escapism is a legitimate reason to read anything. And so, just like, I think, there's lowest common denominator, one thing I told myself I wanted to stop doing, and it's something I've definitely done, is I have crapped on, like, certain film adaptations or things. And you know what? If someone enjoys that, power to them. There's plenty of things for all of us to enjoy. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean it can't be for somebody else. Now, as far as talking about, like, high art and, like, books that could be considered that, I think about, obviously, Watchmen or Sin City, The Dark Knight Returns, V for Vendetta, The Sandman, but
Oh,
also,
that's a good
things
one.
like Mouse, like, currently, is currently being banned, that we talked about just the other week. There are these, like, to me, peak things that are just as good and are just as high quality as some of those great novels you talked about.
Yeah.
The awards won by the Bone series. If you haven't read Mr. Miracle by Tom King, a recent 12-issue series, and the narrative, combined with the art, is some of the best stuff I've ever read. Um, I'm just looking at a few here that I pulled up a list once I ran out of ones I could think of. um, let's see, you know, uh, Batman: The Long Halloween, which was a
Oh,
huge
Long
influence
Halloween is
on The Dark
great.
Knight. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that, I th- and there's some more, and I've got, stuff here behind me that I'm starting to look through, because I'm starting to look outside of the superhero genre for a lot of these books. And it's one of the things I
Yeah.
wanted to do with the podcast, was explore, because I know there's so much. I also just picked up Saga, which is considered one of the best comics written in modern times. I picked up a collection of everything that's come out about for it recently. There's a 9-volume collection, uh, that just recently came out, that you can find at your local comic book shops. And
Yeah.
I'm very, very excited to read that. I was gushing over The Last God, this dark fantasy series.
Chris
The
Ware's Jimmy Corrigan.
Yes, Jimmy Corrigan.
The
Oh,
Sandman
yes.
adapting A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Hmm.
Um, like in that run, that was another. And granted, that's from classic lit, of course, but
Or
to bridge those, that's
it's
great. I think it's the attention that we pay to it and the
yes.
conversation that we have about it. And if you have these conversations about comic books and you pay that close attention to them and you begin to take them seriously, it becomes that, because that really, that's what makes it, that's what elevates it. That,
Mhm.
Colton, a friend of mine and Marcus's, he
Not friends
once
with
talked
Meg.
about that.
Oh my god,
He
specifically.
once talked about that regarding music criticism, and someone had, I think, I can't, don't quote me, but he was talking about how someone had pointed out, and had a problem with how much he was just kind of delving into it and nerding out on a particular thing, and and kind of criticizing that. And he was like, well, me doing that or someone doing that is what makes that album art. It's the conversation that the artist wants you to have about it. And I think that's the same thing about about a comic book, whether or not it's Godzilla meets the Power Rangers or,
I can't wait for
The
that book. Oh my
Watchmen.
god.
Like, yes, it's if you take it seriously, it becomes a serious matter. If
Well,
you treat these things as jokes or disposable books that
well,
uh,
and it's a great point because, like, as much as like we can joke about the Godzilla versus Power Rangers, who's to say that there isn't a very human, relatable story that's going to be happening in that book? Some of my favorite superhero stories, like, I know superheroes are considered the lowest in comics, but some of the best ones, the ones that have stood the test of time, tell the same human stories that you would find in anything else. Just the guy's just wearing colorful tights while they're going through it. And so I- there Tom, I'm so glad you brought that up. But I think part of it too, and this is where I wanted to go into when I asked the question, is that historically comics were primarily, when they first popped up very big, were bought by younger people and were a disposable item, and within a decade or so were highly, highly attacked by people who thought they were corrupting our children. And I feel like the medium has had a tough time escaping that idea. And it doesn't help that two of the biggest comic book companies that aren't, like, I know the largest comic company is actually a Japanese manga company, but Marvel and DC, the two best known here in
really.
America, yes, yeah, they're outselling Marvel and
Who?
DC.
Who?
I've forgotten the name of the company, to be honest with you. I don't read a lot of manga. I will look that up for the future. But Marvel and DC primarily publish, and they've had imprints where they publish other things, but they primarily publish superhero stories. And so when people think of comics, they think of, well, what is comics completely oversaturated with? And I feel like that's not something you find in a lot of other art mediums, where one particular genre just complete, or one style ish, from what you can see on the outside, seems to encompass the entire medium so much. And let's face it, superheroes have been adapted into cartoons for children for decades. And usually that's people's only reference to comic books if they haven't read them, is they're like, oh yeah, my kid watches that cartoon. And cartoons are for
It's
children,
interesting too
right?
because that's where people feel the most offensive about it.
Mm-hmm.
It perception regarding the stuff around superheroes.
Mm-hmm. And so, there's a lot of complex history behind it, and I think that has a lot to do with it. But Tom, I think you're right in that having these conversations, delving into it, that's what elevates it. And that's what I want to do. I'm not necessarily an artist or a writer myself, but I want to elevate this medium. And a lot of that has to do with, I think I've said before, I've had parents of students, parents coming into the library too, who were like, I want my kid to stop reading this comic because these are not good reading material. And I was like, what do you mean? And it was really just based on their own prejudices that they
Yeah,
didn't even know where they came from. And, I look at, like, I have a cousin who, he probably wouldn't have gotten out of high school with, above a third grade reading level, were it not for comics, because that's what he was interested in, those characters and those ideas in superhero comics, and it encouraged him to read. There's so much literary quality, not just in content, but in vocabulary and um, reading ability in those
yeah.
books. All the storytelling elements can be found in there.
So
Inferencing is
many
a
good
skill.
stories too.
Um,
The superhero stories are great. Like
yes.
they've those are the ones that have made me cry the most. Is
No.
with like these
There was a
superhero
there was
stories.
a
And
silent issue of Batman and Robin after
oh,
uh,
I love that.
Robin had died. It was when Robin was Bruce's son Damian, and there's a silent issue, and it's Bruce going through the city, and he sometimes sees flashes of Damian with him, and he's just reacting to it, and it's a devastating issue. It brought me to tears. It brought me to
Well,
Man,
tears.
yeah, and it's a very effective, like, tool for to teach, you know, just in general, but specifically, you know, nonfiction works. I think it's in memoirs. It's very effective in emotional, you know, pulling your heartstrings. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Which
You
is
know what I'm
how
trying to
like
say.
Renaissance art and stuff like that got its start anyways,
Right.
was
Yeah.
to
So
illustrate religious texts so that people
Yeah.
that couldn't read could understand and
And
visualize what was occurring.
and it's so strange because people, you know, will pull up visual art as like, oh yeah, this has the potential to be high art, and they pull up books and it has potential to be a high art, but apparently if you put them together, it can't be.
yes,
But
it's bazooka bubblegum and nothing else.
yeah, like yeah, I think a lot of people just don't.
All or nothing though.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Is
And
that people are doing that
yeah.
lately.
And I honestly like this is why I really want people, and I'm so glad you picked a book that Megan, I would have never picked up embroideries on my own from
Oh,
looking at it.
and it's
But
a ride. It's phenomenal.
that's what I'm most excited about is that we really need to people need to explore these sort of things, and I'm really excited to explore it with you guys and you know everybody that's listening who wants to get into it. Again, if you're not interested in what you heard from the synopsis, I really want you to try it anyway. I think it's very important because we might have some conversations that we didn't know we could possibly have because we experienced something new. So guys, great answers. That was awesome. You're awesome. I love you both.
Podcast over. It's been a
Yeah.
good year.
No.
Thanks, guys.
So before we finish off, I do want to talk a little bit about something that we've been reading lately that we either enjoyed or didn't enjoy, however we felt about it. If we've gotten to read anything in the last week, Meg, do you want to get start us off?
Sure. I just read one thing. I read a graphic novel, a debut graphic novel for artist Lee Lay, and it was published last year. I don't know how I find these things.
You find
I
stuff I've
don't know.
never heard of. I
I
love it.
don't know. It's called Stone Fruit, and it's very beautiful. I was gonna say it's monochromatic, but I don't think it is actually. It is mostly blue, but I think there is. I think there. I don't think it is, but such a beautiful read. It's about a couple um, and their relationship with um, a 6-year-old girl named Nessie, and their roles as kind of her fun and quirky aunts, and how getting to hang out with this kid kind of breaks um, it breaks up their life for a moment and allows them to just kind of be in the moment and in the present and not have like the crushing weight of the world on them. And when they're hanging out with her, they're actually the characters are illustrated differently. They're seen as like these wild beasts. They're like furry and hairy and just like wild looking. And then when they're back in reality, they just look like, you know, normal people. But beautiful, beautiful book. A lot of really interesting themes. A lot of navigating connections with family and religion and identity. Big, big fan. Highly recommend. Very excited that it's her debut graphic novel. Can't wait to see what else she does. Again, I don't remember how I found this book. It was good though.
Excellent.
Glad
It's
I
so
got
easy
it.
to find good books nowadays, though, but like all the different recommendation sites and things like that. And then sometimes you just see something on the shelf or in the new highlighted
I think
thing.
Goodreads is how I get most of my recommendations because it's like, oh, you read this. Here's 20 other things that you must read right now.
I love stuff like that. I need to play around with that site more.
Listen, it's
absolutely.
yes, so much fun. I and that's how I remember everything that I've read because I don't remember Goodreads. That's my other recommendation.
Yes.
Yes,
Goodreads.
yeah. I'm gonna be like messing around with that. I just got some Audible stuff, and so
Oh yeah.
non-comic wise, I was listening to Atomic Habits because I had several friends recommend
Yes.
that
Oh my
book,
gosh.
and it's
Yes.
like sucks you in. So it's great. Like been
So
washing dishes
good.
and reading
Yes.
Atomic Habits or whatever, and being like, this book's great.
Yes. Oh, also been reading some One Piece, as I do.
You have been devouring One Piece lately.
It's so good. I've watched it, but I had never read any of the manga, so I've been been real into that.
Tom, have you been able to dig through any more of Gideon Falls lately?
Yes, and like I finally hit some like twist or reveal stuff, and was like, I was reading with like Augie was playing in the playroom or whatever, and I was reading, and it's just like, oh shit.
Oh my god, yes.
So
That's
there's
awesome.
definitely some there was definitely some I'm real excited with where I think the story is going, and it's definitely got me hooked in now of like the mystery of it.
Well,
But I got to talk to you about one part for
yeah.
sure where I was like, whoa.
Well, luckily, like the piece that you're reading right now has been out long enough that when you finish it, I want you to talk about all of it and like break it
Okay.
down for us and
Okay.
everything. I
But
think that'd be
I've
really
never
cool.
read it.
You
Well,
got to read it. I think you'll really like it.
Okay,
you've got to read it.
let's wait to talk about it till I've read it.
Yeah, it's really good, especially
wanna
if you
spoil it.
like that kind of spooky like
Yes.
stuff like that. It definitely scratches that itch really
Okay,
well.
sweet.
So like I said earlier, I was rereading The Last God, but I've talked about that plenty. So I picked up two issues that I read this past week that I thought were good things. First was Supermassive, which was the first Image Comics crossover between Radiant Black, which is written by Kyle Higgins, who not rebooted, but basically started up the Power Rangers comics and really brought some quality to them. And so he's got this other like Power Rangers-esque characters in the Radiant characters. But they had their first crossover, and it's called Supermassive. But the event itself wasn't super massive. I really got this idea. I was wondering how I'm so used to crossovers where there's some world-ending threat, there's something crazy, and this book was very much a small scale and a setup in that Radiant Black and a couple other characters kind of got a notification through their superhero abilities or whatever that something had crossed dimensional barriers in the woods. So they all happened to run into each other for the first time to stop it. And that was really it. Like, and there's a lot more going on. Like, a couple of the characters have some revelations about things to come in their respective series and stuff, which was really, really cool that it did that. But there wasn't this crazed world ending threat. It was actually a very small first meeting of these characters at the end of the day, which was good because besides Radiant Black, the characters are all pretty new. They haven't shown up in their own series yet. In fact, a couple of them are starting their own series here in the next week or two. So this
Has
was
Radiant Black been adapted into other media? I feel like I've really heard that name
no,
somewhere else. No, just the
no,
comic. Okay.
just a comic. Um, but so I thought Supermassive being this first crossover for these Image superhero properties was awesome. Actually, I like the small scaleness of it, but it does set up some bigger stuff going ahead, and it introduces us to a group of characters who are all pretty different from each other, and each have their own damages too. So that was really cool that I read. And then I know I started X-Men a couple years ago, but I've always struggled to get into Marvel Comics. I've never found a great hopping on point, or I've missed good hopping on points. So this past week, Ghost Rider number my voice cracked. Ghost Rider #1 came out, which is a new Ghost Rider series from Marvel. Obviously, it takes place in their same shared universe, but um, I was really excited for it because Ghost Rider is one of those occult characters, and I'm all about the occult and the magic. Like, Tom, I super support you loving Doctor Strange and WandaVision and all that. And Ghost Rider fits in really well with those types of characters too. Ghost Rider #1 was a great start, and you meet several different kinds of characters in it that Johnny Blaze, our main character, is dealing with. Because for some reason, he has a scar on his head and he's had some sort of brain injury, and he's living in this town with his wife and 2 children. Now, if you're not aware who Johnny Blaze is, so far it doesn't seem important that you necessarily know that character is the Ghost Rider character, which is Flaming Skull riding a motorcycle dude who kicks people's asses for hell.
Yeah, he's like made a deal with the devil, right?
Yes. And but this kind of starts off with he's had some sort of brain injury and he's not quite sure what's going on. And it turns into some body horror in terms of what's really going on. How come he's seeing this therapist, and how did he get away from his previous life? So if you're aware of who he is, you're wondering, how did he get away from his previous life? If you're not aware of who he is, you're like, what the hell is going on? This is really trippy. But as with most comics, it's the first issue, so I can't quite tell where it's going to go. If it explains who some of these characters are that I'm supposed to know pretty well going forward, instead of just assuming I've been reading Ghost Rider for 20 years, this could be a really, really good series and hopping on point.
Yeah, I'm like interested hearing
Yeah.
the description of it.
It's but I just don't know yet. Cool first issue though. If you're interested in the occult, because we got Doctor Strange again, Multiverse of Madness sort of stuff happening soon, but also there's a video game coming out this year or next year, Marvel Midnight Suns, which is about which the comic was about a group of occult characters coming together to deal with the Queen of Demons, Lilith. This could be the start of a great way for you to check out this world within Marvel Comics. Time will tell. I'll keep you guys updated on if it stays good.
Yeah.
So that's all I've been reading. Well, and I've read a bunch of other stuff too, but those were two of my big point ones from this past week. And I think that's it for the week. You guys got anything else?
Nah.
No, this has been a really fun episode.
Yeah, woo, woo, woo. Well, guys, that is going to be it for us then for the week. Thank you so much for listening to VF Comics and Graphics podcast. I want to thank again my brother Zach Robertson for doing our audio editing and putting our episodes together, and Jeff Matika for our intro music. Hopefully I can get him to write me some other cool music because he's a cool dude. And make sure to check out the links in the episode description for joining the book club. We're going to read a new book every single month, and we want to talk to you all about it. And yeah, check all of our social media to keep up with us and keep engaged so we can keep talking about comics. Thank you so much for your time. We will see you guys all next week.